I've got the RE0F10A transmission here. We're just about to start pulling it apart. And now we're going to take off the pan and the valve body. Okay, we're going to just whiz the filter off and then take the valve body off. We don't take off all the bolts. You can see take off these 5. You've got 1, 2 there, 1, 2 here, that one, and this one up here. I've just left that on because I forgot to undo the selector. Okay, I've got the valve body off, and now there's a little clip on the external side of the case there. You just take that off and pull that plug out through the case. When you're putting this back on, you've got to make sure that you align this little selector here with this one here. And then that plug will should maneuver in there, and you should be able to pull it in. There we go. Okay, now we're going to just take the bolts off and just take this bell housing off the case. All the bolts out, and you'll notice that there are shims underneath this sensor here, so just make a note of that. This one's got 1. Can't get it. There we go. Oop, I dropped one. There's another 2 shims underneath it, so make sure you put the 2 shims back in underneath before you put the sensor back on. A little bit to get it off. It was actually stuck on the dowel pins pretty well. You've got to try and wriggle it off. So what I did, I put a bit of WD-40 in where the dowel pins were. This side come off easier, and then I had to just wriggle that one. If you're levering it off, just make sure you do it in the little spots that are supplied, so you don't do damage. If you mess up that mating surface, it'll be very difficult to get flat and to seal properly. Anyway, we've got that bell housing off now, and you can see where the bearing races are and the lubrication tube there. And now we've got the little pump drive chain. That chain actually drives a pump that's located here. These are the pumps that actually wear out, and that's probably giving us this fault code here. Okay, we're just going to take the gears out. They all look pretty good. Differential assembly. Oh, it's a little bit heavy. Okay, now we're ready to take the little cover off that's just covering the chain there. Get the little drive chain cog off, there's a little circlip in there. You just open it up and it'll come off. And you can see that there's a circlip there. You can see that. Just so on there. Okay, I've taken off this little bracket. You just got to make a note of how it goes. And then you've got this little bracket here. What you can do is just mark it if you like, just so you know where it is. I'll probably do it with a little punch. And there you see, I've just marked it with a little punch, just one there and two here, just so I know which way it goes, so I don't have to think as much. I will take this O-ring off. That's the one that applies the torque converter clutch. Just take that off just so that whole stator can slide over it easier. And I always like to check, make sure the bolts are all the same, and if there's any odd one, just mark it. And there we go, the stator's come off. And we're just going to take out this clutch pack, that's the forward drum. And we'll just do a quick inspection of the forward drum. There's a circlip either side of this annulus, and it doesn't appear to be directional, so you can put it on either way. And they look like they're worn, but they're not too bad. They haven't burnt out. Alright, we'll just put that back for the moment. I'm going to remove the planetary assembly. You see the sun gear, and then you've got the planetary assembly there. And when you're doing this, just make sure you don't mix up those Torrington bearings or ball bearings. Just a lot easier if you don't have to think too much. And we just need to loosen that little detent spring there on the selector, because you won't be able to get the clutch out. You can loosen it, you don't have to take it right off. Just so I can be free to get that reverse clutch out. Okay. I'm just going to leave that bolt there. And we're just going to take the reverse clutch out. There we go, it looks like it's been worn, but hasn't burnt out again, which is good. And I'm just going to take the piston out. There we go. Circle it out. We take out the spring assembly. Just make a note that there's a little plate there that goes on top. And there's the piston, and they're a moulded piston. Sometimes these seals flatten out or they wear out on the edges there, so they might appear to look okay, but they're actually worn. The pump out, and I'm just going to take the outer bolts out, not the inner bolts. So just these Allen keys, and they're a 6mm Allen key. Was in there. I've also loosened those outside inside pump bolts, and don't forget that there is one external bolt on the pump, which is this one here, which is on the outside there. And they're 12mm. There it is. It's got the little O-ring on it. We've taken these Allen key bolts off, and that whole pump assembly just pops out. Flip it over and take the side cover off. And in here we've actually got the CVT, the belt there with the pulleys. Okay, I flipped it over and it's a lot lighter now anyway. So we're just going to take this end cover off, and I'll just remove that filter assembly as well, just to get it out of the way. Okay, I've got the cooler assembly off and the little filter, and now we're just going to take this end cover off. Just making a note that the two bottom bolts are actually a bit longer, so I like to mark them with a bit of liquid paper. Again, be very careful when you're removing the end cover so you don't damage this mating surface. There's a little spot here you can just tap. I use like a hammer there and just tap it, but you're going to have to do it either side. It's a little bit hard to get to a spot on this bottom side. What I do is I get a screwdriver and just tap it there gently. The dowel pin's actually over here, so you've just got to alternate tap on this side, tap on this side until it comes up. And you can see, we can see the belt in there now. Now I've just put a couple of bolts in there just so it's easier to lift off. This part is a little bit heavy, so we just lift it out. It gets stuck on the little selector there. There you go. Takes a little bit of wriggling off because these bearings are still located in the case there. And you've also got this little parking pole and the little selector here, so you have to maneuver it off that. And there we have the actual belt part of it. So you need a special tool to remove this part, and the belt also, it's a good idea to put a couple of tie down straps on there either side when you're pulling it apart. I think there's nearly 400 of these little links as well as the belts, so you don't want that coming apart to take you a while to put it back together. Cable tied the belt on both sides. Just going to tighten this nut and you'll see that this will be pulling it up. And we've gone almost to the top there, and you can see that that belt's nice and loose now. Now we're going to undo the bottom bolts on that, and we can take this whole assembly part out. Okay, I've undone just this assembly here, that's a driven one, and using our slide hammer I've just put it on the top bolt and just pulled it out, and that's pulled that bearing out of the housing. Twisted it off and we've removed the belt. I noted on the belt that the rotation is clockwise. Got that one off. Now to undo the bolts on this, and I can take the other assembly. This one actually looks like it's got a problem. I don't know if you can see that. When I rotate it, something's gone amiss in there. Bolts off the housing and take the other side off. If we pull it up nice and evenly, it should just come out. It'll get stuck on the bearing in the case. You might have to just wriggle it around a little bit. Just got to try and get it evenly. There you go. If you get it evenly, it just pops straight out. And that piston's popped out. So it was, you can see all the fine metal in there. So that's actually the problem there. Take that nut off and pull this assembly out. This is the primary pulley, and you've got the secondary pulley. That's just a shim that goes in the case on the bottom side of that. Okay. I'm just going to pull that bearing off now. Piston off. And ta-da, we can see what's happened. The inside's all completely broken away. Little ball bearings have actually broken in half, some of them. So that's what the problem is. It's locked up, and the belt can't run evenly on those pulleys, and it has that pulsating effect. So now we're going to open up the driven pulley as well, just to check it out. Driven pulley, and you can see it's pulled right up. So we're just going to take all our little gadget off. We've undone the nut, pressed off the bearing and the gear off the secondary pulley, and that's the driven one. The other one's the drive one, or the primary. Now these variator pulleys have to be as smooth as glass, so you can see that one's dug in a little bit there, and over here where it was wobbling. So now we're just going to pull this apart in the press. And we let it go. Yeah, got the piston. You can see the teflon ring in there. Big spring, so very dangerous. Circle it. And there's the whole hub. The ball bearings fell out in the sink there, so you've got to be aware that that's going to come out as well. And it's also important that when you're putting those ball bearings in, this circlip isn't left open there so they can fall out. So you've got to make sure that the circlip's sealing all those the ends of those grooves. Now we're replacing this a secondary shaft, or the driven one. Now because if you can see, a bit hard to see, I've got to wipe it off a bit. There we go, you can see where it's dug into that variator pulley. So we're going to replace the whole thing. That has to be mirror finish, all nice and smooth. Another thing to check are where the balls go. There are 6mm balls go in there. In this situation, the balls, grab one. If you can see it, it's completely out of round. It's worn the case hardening off the ball bearings. So if you were reusing this shaft, you'd definitely replace the ball bearings. Now on this shaft, they take 12 ball bearings, or 4 in each slot. So I'm not going to reuse this one. We're going to replace the whole unit, because that half of the pulley is actually a part of the shaft. So I'll just show you how to replace them. What we'll do is we'll just pop out this circlip. And the circlip join is actually here. It's right away from where you can't see where that other little groove is. There we go. So it actually sits there like that, and that will not allow the balls to fall out. You can't actually muck this circlip up, because if you have a look, there's a little bump on it right there. That little bump is located in that part there, so that circlip can't move around either. But what we do, if we were reassembling this one, we'd drop that. And they're a precision fit, they're very tight fit. You'd roll this around until you get it to the groove where the balls are, and you drop 4 balls in the secondary, or the longer shaft one, 4 balls in each groove. So what you'd actually do is you'd have it up like this. Put your balls in each one, rotate it around, put your other 4 balls in, and your final 4 balls, so 12 balls total, and then you'd pop that circlip in, and then that whole part can just lower on itself, it's not going to fall anywhere. Then you'd put your spring back on, you'd replace the Teflon ring on the piston. You can see that, and where's the join? Here we go. It's got like a little step cut join on it. There you go. You can see that. You just lock it in. Actually, I'll pop it right out. And that just pops in like that. So I'll just leave it out just to show you how we're putting this back together. And then in your press, being very careful not to damage that Teflon ring there as you're pressing it down. This piston's actually pressed onto here, onto the shaft, and you press that down, and then you'll follow it up by the little cover, and then you'll put your circlip on, and then after that you'll just return your bearing, press your bearing back on, put the little gear. In this one they've got a 30 tooth gear, and you put your nut on, and don't forget to punch it just so it can't come loose. And basically that would be the reconditioning of that unit if it was serviceable. Now with the primary one, again we're going to replace the whole unit. One, that upper variator pulley is completely broken, and 2, it's chewed into both sides of the chain because that was wobbling around. So these take 6 balls in it, or two ball bearings in each slot. So if we were reconditioning this one, if it was okay, same process or similar process as the other one, would be basically to Well, we'd need to pop that out. Can't get that one out. Anyway, what you'd do, you'd slide this pulley up, take that circlip out. It's very similar to the other, well, it's almost identical to the other one. You'd replace your teflon ring on the piston. You'd move the bigger slot around. If you can imagine, the circlip's not there. This circlip's got the little bump on it as well. You'd probably need to put one ball in. They are a very tight fit, so you may need to put one ball in at a time, just so it holds that all in place, and then put the other balls in. So 2 balls in each slot, and then you'd slide this pulley up. I can't get it up to show you. You'd slide it up just so there's enough room to put that circlip back in, and you'd push it back down like so. Again, being very careful to not damage the teflon ring, making sure that little lock joint's in properly. You'd push that back down, push that in, and it is a very tight fit, so sometimes you need to even press it in, but just do it very carefully, and return the little retainer that you bolt to the end cover, your bearing that you'd replace, and the bolt, and you'd just do that up as well. And that would be the reconditioning part of that.